Oh my God, it's Panda. How are you? Haven't seen you since the beginning of time. Hang on, just have to reply to a message here, guys. Oh, in Seoul, cool. Sorry about this. This is all your fault, Valentina. I'm communicating with Jacob. Boom, right, just trying to set up a meeting with him. Yeah, I'm in London. Just came back from Norway there with the family, sitting here in the medium to good weather. And there we go. Hello. Yeah, Valentina, just about, while we're waiting for it to fill up a little bit, about our discussion earlier, we'll have to look at the what we would call reference manager outwards, and we just call it library inwards. Hello. People I haven't seen very often. This is quite the treat. On Tuesday, we did the introduction of that does not look like you, Vint. That didn't look like you, that profile picture.
No, it's because I was using my wife's, that's not my wife either. That's the woman who runs the technical side of my wife's book club. She's set up a Zoom account, and somehow the system is now, and I made a call recently using that account, and now Zoom seems to think that that's my account. And so it keeps, I'll have to go reset something, I suspect.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. It's a bit weird. Right, so yeah, we're filling in here with some new people. I expect a few more people, but I wanted to update you guys a little bit on kind of the side issue of visual meta. So on Tuesday, Vint and I introduced it to ACM and the world. It went very well. It was good fun. And this morning, well, not depending where you are, Valentina and I had a meeting. Valentina and I, whom you may not all know, we work together. Thank you, Panda. And we realized that people don't really search for a word processor when they go to university, but they do search for reference managers. So we're going to have to add a reference manager to the work that we're doing with the text software for that reason. That was a bit of a shock. Valentina was wondering if my mic wasn't working very well because I was talking very haltingly during that conversation. So that's very interesting. There's so many pieces of the text reading and writing bits. So a bit of a wake-up call. Oh, Jessica's here as well. Wow.
Frode, could you say a little bit more about what a reference manager does for you?
Yes, I can. Just want to say hi to Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Good to see you again. Hi, Bob. Yeah, in terms of reference manager, a reference manager can be a boring and stupid thing. Stupid in the sense of software lack of interaction and not doing anything, like maybe the word is dumb. Basically a collection of documents, but it's not the documents that the reference manager cares about. It is the listing of them for citing. So for instance, it may not even have the documents. So it can, in the reference manager, can have a book that you don't own, but it's in the library, but it's still there for you to be able to cite that book.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, with the stuff we've been doing with visual meta and so forth, we can make a very active reference manager. And what I hated with reference managers, and I'm looking at everyone's face now to see if they agree with me, is that if you are reading a document through a reference manager and then you do an annotation, let's say something as simple as highlight, you can then not in the reference manager say, for instance, search all my documents for annotated text that has this keyword.
Oh, that's interesting.
It doesn't know the content of the document. And I think that's where we in this community have a bit of an edge. So that's what we talked about this morning. Anyway, over to the future of the text. I think maybe because the community here today is a bit varied, which is great. Can we have some very brief introductions? Maybe Fabian, because in my screen you are first. Could you say hello to everyone?
Hi, great to be here. I'm coming to the group via David Felsman, whom I'm founding Napkin together with, and we're building an organic network of thoughts to collect thoughts, connect them, and have them easier access in daily life. So it's kind of a organic system of text, and I'm really happy to be here to see all those wide perspectives on text.
Excellent. And funnily enough, David is visually next.
Okay, that fits perfectly, actually. Yeah, we started building Napkin end of last year. That was when I really dived into the whole community around text and mindful productivity. And what I guess I saw you first in a call with Anne from Nest Labs. And yeah, that's why I'm basically was circling back to your community recently. And there you offered the opportunity to contribute a piece to the next volume.
Yeah, which I'm looking forward to very much. Thank you for agreeing with that. Oh, Panda is typing. Yes. We met, let's not tell everyone how long that is ago, but it is. We met in the middle of the night, in the middle of Soho, in the middle of arguments, 2 tables next to each other. And yes, that's a long, beautiful story there. Bent, you don't need much of an introduction, of course, but is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, thank you for that. All of you probably know my long connection with the internet. It continues. And I'm very, very interested in what Frode and the rest of you have been doing in terms of computers and text and our ability to interact with it. Recently, I've been increasingly concerned about preservation of digital content. And the visual meta has the nice feature that it is remarkably robust. Frode has pointed out repeatedly that it's just text added to the end of a PDF, and you can scan it, you can OCR it, you can essentially recover it. And it has full information for the ability to find things that it references. The one thing I do worry about, of course, is that even when you have the information about what the thing is that is referenced, it may still be hard to find it. But at least you have a lot of information about where it came from and who wrote it, and maybe a little bit about where it might be found. So I'm interested in these discussions because I think they'll have real bearing on the way we are looked at from the perspective of the 22nd century.
Yeah, and when we were discussing this book earlier.
Oh, yes, right.
Before I move over to you, Jessica, I just want to read from the intro to this book. I think it's relevant for all of us. It's about reinventing discovery, the new era of network science. He says, I wrote this book because I believe the reinvention of discovery is one of the great changes of our time. To historians looking back 100 years from now, there will be 2 eras of science, pre-network science and networked science. So we've got to do so many different ways to make the network science happen. So it's very exciting. So yeah, Jessica.
Hi all. So unfortunately I didn't participate in the last meetings, so I'm interested in the current status of everything, and I'm just basically listening.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, you are in the first book, The Future of Text, and you were, of course, one of the 2 organizers of the first academic paper that mentioned visual meta. So that was very grateful for that, Human 19. So it's great. You're such a core member of the hypertext community. It's just very, very, very nice to have you as part of our dialogue.
Oh, thank you very much.
Bob, I can see you, even though you're a bit dark, I can see you.
Yes, well, it's very early in the morning here in San Francisco. I just got up. And let's see, well, I can turn on another light. Does that help at all?
To the contrary, it makes you more of a, don't worry, we can see.
Sorry. Well, I have not gone down to my studio yet in the morning. I'm still eating my croissant. And I'm Bob Horn. The last 27 years, I've been at Stanford University as a research scholar, but mostly worked with international task forces on the major problems facing humanity for the next 100 years. Before that, I wrote a book called Mapping Hypertext that came out a couple of years before the World Wide Web came out. I was a friend of Doug Engelbart, and actually was the first speaker on Doug Engelbart Day at Oregon State University.
That was a good day.
It was a wonderful day. I'll stop there, but that's the sort of thing I do.
And Peter.
Okay, I'm an attorney, a programmer, and independent scholar. My main research interest of late has been shifting into foresight and university of futures. I've had previous interests in digital libraries, been involved in the hypertext community since I met Mark Bernstein way back at a Macworld Boston, back when we used to actually have Macworld Bostons and real meetings in the good old days. And I see visual meta as opening a lot of doors for changing the way we do scholarship in academia, just getting more into the meta content, interlinking things in the library catalog so it can be a social medium instead of just a one-way frozen output channel for some unknown group of catalogers out there to do things. One of the most memorable experiences I had was noticing that some books from the law library at Syracuse University seemed to be lacking terms that would have made it much easier to find them. There'd been a conference over in Italy one year that had a lot of Prolog source code in it, and the thing managed to not get indexed under Prolog, not get indexed under computation and law, and only get indexed under the name of the city the bloody conference was in, making it absolutely impossible to find it with a normal catalog. And it's like, so frustrated at the time, urging libraries, well, why can't we augment that record? It's like, oh no, we can't change catalog records. Well, that's pristine. Heaven forbid we allow user content to leak into our library catalog annotations. The user might be wrong. Like, but you're lacking the information that I need to find the critical resource. So in the era of visual meta, all that will start to change. And we can have open hypermedia servers adding visual meta to documents, and you can choose what augmentation sources you want to bring into the catalog. It's just a sparkling new future that we're building here.
So I would like to add to your profile, Peter, that not only are we both from Syracuse, well, university, but also you've been one of the two most annoying visual meta contributors, along with Mark Anderson, pointing out the silly silly details to nth degree to really highlight the problem we have. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And finally, we have Alan, who just joined us. We're just doing basic intros since the group is a bit different today, which is great.
And don't forget Valentina.
Oh, I'm not forgetting Valentina. But hi, Alan.
Hi. So I should introduce myself?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, all. I'm Alan. I'm not sure actually what we're going to be talking about on this one, but I had a few minutes between meetings to jump in, so I wanted to say howdy. I work at Twilio, but I've been interested in this topic for a good long time from the UX and perspective. And as you I'm sure we'll see soon enough, I can be very verbose about it. So I'll stop talking for now.
I'd say passionate, but fair enough. And then there's Valentina. Hi, Valentina.
Yay. Hello, everyone. I've met Freud at the press conference of Quark Express. That's how old we are. So I work in comms and PR, public relations. I've been working in the tech space for quite some years, and I've done some other things. But in this particular project, I'm just trying to help out with marketing and just a bit of publicity around the book and the project Visual Meta. And I also work with Freud on his software publicity as well.
Thank goodness. Yeah, so a couple of things. Update. Number one, the book is supposed to be launched at the Future of Text Symposium in November. We decided not to do that. We're going to now launch the book on the 9th of December. for two reasons. It's the anniversary of Doug's demo, and also Vint and I are doing a presentation with Ismail at the summit of the book. So it seemed like just a date, an arbitrary date. The reason we're pushing it back is Ismail, who is busy diving in the ocean outside of Egypt somewhere right now. He has brought together an amazing group of not very texty people, but passionate nevertheless, but they happen to mostly be former presidents and prime ministers and so on. So he's really pulled out the big guns to get a completely different layer of what we're doing. These people are not going to sit down and write papers, but they're very happy to be interviewed. So to organize that and to get some sort of cohesion for that, so Valentina can have a book to give people in the press so they're aware of this, we need more time. That doesn't mean anyone here should give their contribution in later if you can. It's a week now. If you need a few more days, of course you can have it, but that's the big update change. And I think most of you are also aware that Vint and I introduced Visual Meta to ACM on Tuesday, which went down quite well. And interestingly, after that, Mark Anderson found a few mistakes in the Visual Meta in the BibTeX. We had an assumption that ACM would just take the normal download page BibTeX and paste it into the Visual Meta. Turns out their production system doesn't work like that. And just like Elon Musk says, it's one thing to make a car, making car factory is much harder. So even on this very simple level, making a production system for Visual Meta is turning out to be a challenge, which is fair enough. So we'll keep working on that. And Vint very kindly is helping to introduce Visual Meta to other organizations, which I think will be crucial, obviously, to making it useful. But today is kind of an open discussion. I mentioned earlier the need to update reference managers. I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on that, or if there are any other aspects of the future of text you'd like to talk about. Yeah, Vint.
I have to unmute, yeah. I have a thought that just, as you were talking about the visual meta and proper generation in the ACM digital library, I got to thinking about your observation in an exchange we had that at least visual meta is self-contained, whereas things like DOIs and URLs, while the string is evident, there's nothing useful you can do with it unless there's some place that will resolve it. And so the external dependency on the resolution system is apparent. But if the resolution system is still around, if it still works, do you suppose there would be a useful, it would be useful to include in the visual meta text block either URLs or DOIs if they were available, so that there'd be a binding between whatever the visual meta is referencing and possible online resolution mechanisms to find the content.
Yeah, this is something we've been talking about quite a bit in two places. One, in the self-citation, we put down different ways of doing that. Peter's been pushing quite hard on having a hash before the visual meta, which can also provide other ways of finding it. And in the reference section of the document, there should be multiple ways to finding the source. So yeah, that's important. I see the name Tversky here. I'm assuming that's Barbara who's joining us.
Yes.
What an honor to have you here. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Well, I'm a cognitive, hello, Vint. I'm a cognitive scientist, psychologist, and I've been, I think, relevant to this group. I've been interested in how diagrams communicate, charts, maps, also gesture. So I'm hoping to add some of that to my contribution.
You forgot to mention you've written one of my favorite books, Mind in Motion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and Mind in Motion does, the basic tenet of Mind in Motion is that spatial thinking is the foundation of all thought. And that all creatures need to move and act in space in order to survive, even grass. And so that's the contention, and we back it up with brain research, place cells in hippocampus and grid cells, which make a spatial layout next door in entorhinal cortex. We make it through language. You're feeling up, you're feeling down. We make it through behavior, through gestures, through diagrams. So we're arguing against the hegemony of language, although I'm a big fan of language. I use it all the time. So does that give you a 2-minute introduction?
I have a feeling Vint is about to unmute.
You're right. Your ESP must be working overtime. I was reacting and positively actually to what Barbara was saying, despite our focus of attention in this group on text, which is such a valuable tool, especially for communicating with the future. The idea that non-human intelligence is demonstrated in a non-language, non-textual way, but yet problems get solved, and spatial problems in particular. I mean, I was watching a video of a gray parrot figuring out it needed to get a twig in order to poke through a hole to knock a little peanut out of the glass tube to, you know, have a snack. And as you watch non-human intelligences solving problems, you appreciate that they do so without benefit of language. So there are arguments that say that language is not necessary for thought. Now, this I do not agree with, and I suspect Barbara would probably have a view on this. I believe that language is an aid to thinking, and I frankly talk to myself, and maybe you do the same thing when you're trying to sort through various and sundry ideas. But I will say that diagrams and pictures are central to my problem solving style. And in fact, it's almost impossible for me not to draw pictures of things to try to understand how they interact with each other. But the text is there when you get to the explanation of what's going on. So I think I resonate. I'm going to go. I have not read Barbara's book yet, but I made a note that I need to go get that and add it to my reading list.
Yeah, it truly is wonderful. I think, yeah, Alan. Oh, sorry, who was talking?
Yeah, I was just that was led to a thought. I mean, if open hours, if this is a topic, but I wound up, when I was sort of tinkering on an article, I wound up starting with the supposition, which may just be, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. What if we just said there is no future of text? What if we took that stance and then well, what happened? Well, where did text go? What replaced it? What was the situation we got into where suddenly text, by whatever definition we give text, is no longer sufficient? And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, if it's fruitful.
Bob, just 1 second. I think, Alan, that was primarily towards Barbara, right?
Oh, that was for the group.
Okay, but okay. Why don't we all think about that while we have Bob? Because I think that's a very provocative and huge question.
I just want to say hi, Barbara, and that the chapter or article, whatever you call it, for the second volume of The Future of Text, which I just sent to Rhoda yesterday, I think it was, is called Diagramming, Metadiagramming, and Mega Diagramming. I'll send you a copy. I think I still have your email. I'm still Hornbob at Earthlink. Good to see you.
Yeah, Barbara, yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Good to see you. And I've certainly been influenced by your work. I just wanted to say a couple of words to Vint and the group about thinking without language. We've studied both architects and artists, and in particular architects, who design using sketches, as you often do, I'm sure. And they can't talk while they're designing. The words get in the way. We videotape them, and afterward, we go through the video with them, asking them what they were thinking each time they made a mark and when they got new ideas. And the new ideas came from scrutinizing the sketches. They saw things in the sketches that they hadn't intended, and the experienced architects were much better at this. They could make conceptual inferences, like the traffic will move badly or the light will fall badly. But they talk about it as a conversation between the hand, the eye, and the mind, and words get in the way. And I had another graduate student, a very talented artist, who studied artists for whom drawing is their major source of income, highly experienced drawers. She did the same, asked them to draw. She was sure they could talk while they were drawing. They couldn't. And again, they said the same thing, that it's a wordless conversation between the eye and the hand and the page. They're all integrated in this. They say drawing allows them to explore. It's safe. The ideas generate themselves, drawings generate drawings. So it becomes an extremely productive way of thinking. And I imagine that carpenters, other people working with their hands, have a similar, people who work at making pots, that it's a similar sort of thing between the hands moving and the body feeling as the pot's going up and so forth. So it may not have the general intelligence that equations or language and so forth do, but if you think about normal conversation or canonical conversation, not on Zoom where it's in person, we're using our hands, we're pointing to things in the world, we're rearranging things in the world. So it's inherently multimodal. And that's, I think, my vision for text. It's already happened that it's multimodal, but fully integrated the way that conversation is integrated.
And that's how it's integrated in diagramming. That is, you don't do diagrams very much without these days without some words or even quite a lot of words. My chapter that I just sent to Frode, it starts with a short paragraph that somebody sent me from elsewhere and said, here's a book you'll be interested in. And it was a book on psychopharmacology. And the paragraph was from the introduction or preface, and said, I recommend to students who are, graduate beyond medical. Medicine is a prerequisite for psychopharmacology. I recommend to students reading using this book that you do not read the text, but only read the diagrams. And then if you need to review or go back, or need to understand maybe something that we didn't get in the diagram, you can try reading the text there. And I counted the diagrams, and there were something like 550 diagrams in there. So then I went around at Stanford and asked a bunch of medical students. Every quarter you get a whole stack of these 600-page books. Do you read them? They said, oh no, we never read them. We don't read the text. We read the diagrams.
Yeah. One of the things in this discussion, picture, text, and all these elements, I think it is uncontroversial to say that different types of personalities can read in different types of ways and write in different types of ways better. My own background is that as a visual artist, Chelsea School of Art and all that good stuff. I'm doing my PhD now, and I'm having an absolute hell of a time, in the bad sense, of trying to make a huge long column of text. because that's what they want. I find that extremely difficult. To do a piece here and a piece there and how they relate, absolutely. So to me, it is obvious what you guys are saying, and it's so obviously important as well that we need to invest in how to liberate text from the horrible gray column that it has become because of print. So it's very nice to hear this dialogue today and to think of not only the more primitive way of saying visuals are more important, because that's useless as well, but how can we use these to empower each other to really help us understand and communicate? Yeah, for sure.
In defense of text a little bit, even though I was a cartoonist before I got into coding and everything, so it's definitely my default way of thinking. But as a devil's advocate, there's a couple things. There's one. This was an art exhibit that went on for a while, The Temptation of the Diagram, and it's really just talking about the state of diagrams is like lacking a superstructure organizing principle, whether that's good or bad. But then the temptation part is a little bit of we can get sucked into the allure of a diagram and think that we're coming away with some kind of meaningful information when maybe we're not. And that's an interesting pull there where text comes in, as agreed that it is not as native as the hand-eye coordination that architects have, but text is like the original programming language in a way where we're taking intent and coding it somewhat so that it can be scalable. Or at least that's one way that I've heard it described, as a technique to code and scale. And with that, meaning and context is lost. So diagrams preserve some context in a way, but then diagrams also solidify. They turn things that are impressions or fogs into little nodes or like specific concepts. I see this all the time in causal maps. But anyway, so I love the topic. It's an interesting tug of war.
Only if you have one kind of diagram, which is only one kind of diagram that you described. And what's really important, I suggest, is that we do a 1,000,000 diagram project that interlinks hypertext the diagrams and see what you can diagram with all the different kinds of diagrams, some of which I've listed in my book, Visual Language, and then be able to see what other kinds of text are there. We could, because this is the program that I think of that's totally integrated with the future of text and the future of diagrams, is thought improvement. How do we improve our thinking, particularly in the face of the kind of complexity that we have?
Yeah, and Bob, as you know just as well as me, of course, Doug was interested in interactions and visualizations, but key is to be able to change the visualization. So I think we're very much on the same page, even though we think it's important to change page.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
Yeah, Barbara.
So I talked about sketches for architects and artists. They're messy, they're ambiguous, and they allow reinterpretation. And there is, of course, another kind of diagram, circuit diagrams, flow diagrams, where you want absolute clarity. So, and they're serving quite different roles in thinking. So that's one issue. Another is, I tried to say that in canonical conversation, we're using the world, our hands, intonation of our voices, all in an integrated way. It's a bit harder to do that on a page, even, and hypertext, as we all know, can be confusing and we can get lost. Comics try to do that, try to integrate words and pictures, and often the words are sounds, they aren't necessarily complete sentences and so forth. The words can be all kinds of things. The size of the words, the font, all of that makes a difference where they are. still comics lack I think for most people aren't as fluid as conversations. So that becomes a challenge, I think. How do we integrate the visual parts with the word parts and use different kinds of words to be integrated into a message? And those are design challenges.
Absolutely. Out of the Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari's great work, my favorite sentence is he says, writing was invented to solve different problems from speech. So I don't think we should try to copy speech into writing, but we should surely try to make writing more richly communicative, for sure. Absolutely.
Totally agree. One last little bit about that. The thing that I really hope that the word diagram or whatever visual representation, visual language can include motion somehow at some point, because I think so often when we have these conversations, we assume we're talking about a flat printed diagram or image, and it becomes a totally different picture, especially on a whiteboard when you're using gestures and motions and saying, this happens here this way. A lot of that is lost in a causal map when you just have that. Anyway,
yeah, but that's one kind. One causal map
Yeah,
is only
of course.
one small kind, one small sector of diagramming.
So one thing, the group here, more people than, well, so a little bit of mix of who's here or not. On Mondays and Fridays, we meet for an hour. We've been talking about visual meta forever. But recently, we've also been talking about video and how it should be possible to cite video easily. Of course, you can do copy location to time in a YouTube video, but to have that transcribed, have that in a document where you can discuss what happened in a meeting like today, both this text, have the video to be able to pull it forth, to explode this into different views that have, well, time as one of the key elements, so we can see why did we refer to this and all that. That seems to be a very promising, rich way to go forward, because time is one of those amazing things. Almost all knowledge has some kind of time element, at least while you're working on it, to try to thread this on. So that's definitely one of the conversations we're having on a regular basis now. We started on a little bit on Friday, on Monday, and the last video recording got corrupted, can you believe it, on my Mac, so it's gone. I tried to upload it to YouTube and it didn't work, and then I tried to drag it again and it literally disappeared in front of my cursor, highlighting many problems with digital knowledge, obviously. Anyway, this is definitely where the group is going. How can we, yeah, I see your face there, Peter. It's not, when we're talking about the future of text, it most certainly isn't just about, how do we move around a few characters of text on a page. And since there's a little bit of quiet while I'm breathing, the time issue, but also the reference management thing, I may now have to start working on reference management software, because Valentina pointed out to me this morning that when people change from, let's say, high school to university, they don't say, oh, I got to go on and find a word processor, which is my product. They don't do that. They have one. Very few people do, but they do say, oh, now I may need a reference manager. So we realized that we may have to build one. It's probably going to be very simple, but I'm also saying that to the group, and that as people who are not interested in this topic go through different stages of life, they look for different types of tools. So maybe it's time to inject some effort into how that can become. And a reference manager could be the most richly interactive multi-document workspace we could imagine, or it could be a simple list. It's kind of up to us.
Can you go into a reference manager and what you mean by that in this context?
A basic reference manager is a database. It doesn't necessarily have to have the material inside it. Many of them will have the PDFs, but they can also refer to books, which may not be, it may just be a physical book on the bookshelf. So it literally is a database. So it is, I need to cite for my paper, oh, I think I read something by so-and-so, find it and copy it over to Word through some kind of a plugin. It's really quite clunky. So the idea is that a reference manager should be able to do searches inside documents based on something you may have annotated, which is currently not possible. So in photography, we have Lightroom and software like that, or Photos on Mac as well. It's a place where you organize your documents, your pictures. There's nothing really for that to organize documents that is 21st century interactive and powerful. It just doesn't exist. All of them have severe limitation based on their take of history. If we build things and say this is for PDFs and books only, and on import, you will have visual meta appended to your PDF. You just have to deal with that. Then the reward will be you can view it in myriads of ways, including annotation layers, relationship maps. We did the timeline, of course. Some of you were part of that. Citation timeline, we could do so many things. So even though reference manager sounds like the most boring thing a university student could possibly have, we could make it an incredible thing. You know, we can think of Lawnmower Man or BR or Minority Report standing doing all this stuff. It doesn't have to be with goggles, even on a computer screen. We can go back. And of course, in the 90s, there was a lot of research on multi-interactive environments for lots of documents. Seems to have kind of died away. Now, with the powerful computers and APIs and the data we have available, we can probably do something amazing together at relatively low cost. I can see Bob is in front of his bookshelf. You know, imagine exploding that bookshelf into any visualization we want, right? We need that right now, don't we? I've been scared of doing it because it costs money to develop, and I'm a really bad business person. But as a community, we can't afford to keep ignoring how we organize it. Gosh, look at Jessica's cat kind of stealing the show here. Yeah, we have to do the kind of leap that the cat just did, okay? I'll leave it there.
Well, I'd like to be able to organize all the diagrams in that one book, and also in a whole field, which is another kind of reference manager, but probably the one that you're building would be able to do that, which would be very useful.
That's very interesting, Bob, because my preoccupation has been the first paragraph of my thesis says that I am very concerned that the idea of taking stuff from one's brain onto a substrate in terms of text, diagrams, and so on, and then taking that stuff into someone else's brain. We don't have a very well-developed language around what that process is. So in my own thesis, I used the word concept, and I kind of explain what I mean by that because it could mean so many things. It's the ordinary meaning. So in what we're building a way to write using concepts. So the concept map does that. It works extremely simple. Let's say, for instance, you make a defined concept, Doug Engelbart. And then below that, you write, Doug Engelbart worked at SRI. Let's forget everything else. And then you have another concept that is SRI. And then you write, originally called Stanford Research International. Put that in a visual space. Now, if you click on Doug, you'll automatically get a link, visual link to SRI, because SRI is in that definition. But if you click on SRI, you will not get a line to Doug because it doesn't mention Doug. So instead of having lines on the screen all the time that are making it messy, whatever you click on will radiate out. So the idea is that you keep moving things on a screen to kind of work the space for you, your own messy desktop, so to speak, or desk, to keep developing how you understand it. And when you click on something and there isn't a line that should be there, it's a very simple way for you to say, okay, Command D for define, go in and change it. So it has that definition. So that's how we're approaching it within the augmented text framework. It's very concept way of writing. But there are obviously other dimensions that can be added to this. So we kind of look forward to how that will work. As a tiny little thing before you, Peter, I see your hand. In this environment, if you export to PDF, all these definitions become a glossary. And in the glossary, every reference to another entry is a link. So you can basically read the whole paper purely as a glossary and get basically all the knowledge that you need because it shows the student or author's intentions for how things connect. So instead of it being a diagram, it is a very explicitly connected way of writing. Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, when I'm programming, I sort of have a scatter gather kind of approach where I'll be working on one aspect of a project, and then I'll go and clone the project, work on something else. And then over time, I'll wind up starting a whole bunch of things in parallel. So that's sort of the scatter phase. And then I have a gather phase where I go back in and look at all the little working examples of the different pieces and start trying to reintegrate them. Once I have them reintegrated, I go back and delete the individual duplicate projects that get too cluttered at that point. So then a, sort of like a cleanup phase after regathering the content, and then I move forward into another cycle of the exact same sort of process. So having the temporal dimension added on with the text search can be very, very helpful, because sometimes I have trouble figuring out which clusters of things that look almost identical structurally were really related to each other temporally.
Interesting. Fabian and David, you haven't spoken. Is there anything you would like to say or add or question? Or very glad you're here. Just want to make sure you're feeling part of the conversation, of course.
It's really interesting to get those ideas in conversation. And like one thing I was randomly having on my mind earlier was when you talked about the limitations of language and the limitations of text, and then like how text was invented to solve the limitations of speech or to solve different problems. I mean, Lovelock, like who wrote a lot about the Gaia theory and the world as a whole organic system, as one big ecosystem, says is that language is really bad, or text is really bad in describing dynamic and complex systems. And I was also thinking about maybe the problem you're having in writing longer text volumes might be a symptom of the world being more dynamic, more intertwined, more connected. And therefore the linear version of text is just not as suitable anymore to describe it. And we need a more networked version of text. And therefore it could just be a symptom of the times.
Love it. If I could add on to that a little bit, because it sort of plays into the earlier talks about diagrams. Mm-hmm. I think of an outline as a kind of diagram, or a weird middle ground evolution of what is, you know, hierarchical linear text. It's like a step in this direction towards being able to handle complexity, but it's still obviously hierarchical. And it begs the question, could we have something, what I love about outlines is that they're so low level, right? That they can become ubiquitous. They're a tool on the, you know, like hyperlinks, you know, but I'd love to see something, a next step beyond outlines that don't necessarily require an app or an interface, and be that scatter that you were talking about, Peter, but still in a way that can be gathered into an outline as needed. Maybe people are working on that and I'm just not aware of it, but I'd love to know.
I think that's the holy grail, at least for me. I think we're going down some interesting weird alleys, like the hashtags are useful in some context, but not in others. I think that in Rome and Notion and things like that, which I don't use very much, I'm talking from a point of ignorance, they seem to add a layer of organizational structure that isn't actually that useful. You know, you end up having a lot of things with a certain tag, but it may not, you know, if you haven't explicitly said why it relates to it, when you're talking about what you said, it becomes kind of mushy. Yeah, Vince?
Well, I'm just thinking a little bit here. First of all, if you've ever experienced programs that are intended to help people have conversations in text form. A very early one was called Planet, for example, way back in the 1970s. The idea was people sending messages to each other, but they were organized around particular topics. And so this was thought to be really a wonderful tool for helping people to have these sort of curated conversations. And what would happen, of course, is that you'd have a topic, but the exchanges that took place would drift away from the topic. And so it turned out that the organizational structure didn't help, because you couldn't stop people from wandering. So it's an example of how a structure doesn't always work because people don't cooperate. And that's why hashtags are a form of binding, but they're not much better than the problems we had with these curated conversations. So that's one point. The second one, though, is a little different. I was thinking about word problems in mathematics. And word problems are descriptions of relationships. And, you know, and what you're trying to do is to sort out in more detail exactly what those relationships are. You calculate them. John was when John was 10 years old, he was 3 years older than Mary, who was half as old as Frank was when Frank had hair. You know, and what color is Mary's hair? What happens is you take this textual description and you map it onto symbols that can be manipulated according to a set of algebraic rules. And so there's a very interesting example where the text is almost useless from the standpoint of solving the problem, although it is, if it's well stated, it is sufficient to map into a different representation which can be manipulated according to rules. And you could argue that the mathematical expressions are text in some sense, but they are text with a particular property, which is that they can be manipulated in useful ways according to standard rules. Now, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with any of this, except to observe that two kinds of text, the mathematical equations on the one hand, and the textual description which leads to the equations, are completely different in terms of their utility if you're trying to solve a problem. And I don't know whether that example maps into any other spaces that we've been talking about, but for me, it's a little startling to discover that two different textual representations have such dramatically different utility. Barbara's got the answer.
So it really astute point, and there's been a fair amount of research in the cognitive literature showing that different representations of the same information are more effective, less effective. We've looked at, you know, graphing things as matrices versus bars. People make completely different kinds of inferences from those. And so there's a long line of that. But I wanted to point out about both outlines and equations that there are spatial aspects to the way they're organized. Years ago, a colleague of mine at Stanford, Raviel Netz, who studies classical mathematics, pointed out that syllogistic reasoning is basically a table where you're lining up the arguments on one side and the conclusions on another, but you're using that spatial array to drive the thinking and drive the representation. Indentations for paragraphs, right? Starting new pages, all spaces between words, they're all spatial visual properties that aid our reading and our understanding. So we have a mix there anyway of spatial aspects, visual aspects, and text. And in fact, the space is organizing the text into sentences, paragraphs, chapters.
That's very, very important. And I just wanted to kind of reel back a little bit towards text itself, because, you know, as any good teacher would say to a student being excited about something, write it down. Because the act of writing it down makes it concrete. You know, you can look at, does this thing actually fit that? You know, it becomes a thinking space. So yes, we need to further use the visual aspect of text. Absolutely, that is what we're talking about. We mustn't forget that at least academic writing is a process of, the way I see it anyway, taking a myriad connected world of knowledge, linearizing it into an argument, and then letting the reader explode it back into that universe. So the linearizing, even if it is for shorter things, like an abstract or something, still is a very positive and crucial aspect of text, not just an annoying and difficult one as my current perspective sees it, to put it from here.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned abstracting. I don't know whether, of course, in volume 2, there's a contribution about abstracting, but for volume 3, I already have all my notes put together for a chapter on improving abstracting. So that's a very, I think it's a very important field, and the medical journals have done the best job of working on that.
That's really worthwhile point, Bob. Already in volume 2, Nils Ole Finneman has written a considerably longer piece on the problems with timelines, because the history of text that we've written will be an appendix in this book to help you for context. But just even doing a timeline is so limited, and we need a discussion over why it's limited and how it's relevant. So to have a full discussion beginning on the notion of abstracting is absolutely phenomenally interesting, because obviously it's lossy, obviously you're going to lose something, because otherwise, why would you have the rest of the document? So it seems to be a much more important topic that is easily acknowledged. Yeah, we will have to finish in a few minutes. I see Valentina has to leave in a minute. That's okay. But yeah, and this has just been a wonderful, wonderful discussion, and it's nice to be able to have this discussion along the lines of actually writing books about it. So this doesn't just get lost in the sand, but we do hope we can develop a better system for recording even these chats. I mean, this has been wonderful today. I'm just honored to be part of all these ideas and insights flying across. Oh, I do have one question for Barbara, and that is, some kind of therapy thing has come up where you're sitting in a therapist office and you're told to look at a certain pattern around the room so that you will calm down, remove anxiety. Apparently that comes from the idea that when you're out walking, because you're walking forward, your brain, something in your limbic system, yeah, that's it, EMDR, thank you. But when you're moving forward, it sends the signal to your brainstem, your limbic system rather, sorry, that you're safe because you're not running away, you're moving towards something calmly, and therefore it reduces anxiety. How much would you say, how much credence would you give to that? Because that may even work into the dynamic issues we deal with, how to move information on a screen. Is some information moving going to give you stress? Is some of it actually going to give you peace, etc.?
Though I don't know the research on that, I'd have to check it, but it's certainly an interesting thought. I mean, you think about movies that we go to, some go fast, some go slow, to some extent, and even life, how fast a pace do we want things? So some of that clearly is going to be a personal choice. Some people take uppers, some people take downers. Some people find meditation useful, some find it boring. So I mean, some of that is going to be individual, and to some extent we can control that. But yeah, moving forward does have priority, and that I'd like to hear more about that and perhaps look into the solid research.
Yeah, apparently the acronym is EMDR. So yeah, it's interesting. We have a lot to learn as a species.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness you could say that. That's a good perspective. So since we're coming up to the end of time for this, just want to tell you guys that, sorry, let me just check my calendar and make sure I'm not saying something wrong. Yeah, today, British time, we started this at 3 o'clock. So the Monday and Friday meetings, they all start when this hour now starts, as in it's an hour later than this. Some of us are there very often. I try to be there every one, of course. If you feel like coming in and spending a few minutes or the whole time, there's no commitment, but we are now branching into new territory, and it's just, oh, that was Panda, you were saying that, right? Oh yeah, you're replying, good. Anyway, so you're welcome to join that, and of course, look forward to the contributions. Bob, I have yours, which is fantastic. And Peter, I got your email, thank you. And other than that, it's time to build. We are building a few things in this community. David and Fabian, love to hear more in detail about what you guys are doing. That would be good too. Any closing comments from anyone? Well, actually, I'm going to put Jessica on the spot because, okay, yeah, Barbara, I'll come back to you for sure. But Jessica, since you are so...
I was just waving goodbye, but I'm happy to hear from Jessica.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, Jessica, because of, there was Hypertext 21 this week, which was amazing. I didn't see all live because I was flying back from Norway. But anyway, is there anything you would like to anchor this discussion into academic current movements in hypertext, maybe?
I just was listening today, basically, but the comments that I heard have been very interesting for me. And I think that text or language in general maybe can really have many, many forms. And this discussion also reminded me of spatial hypertext. I guess some of you know it, this approach. So spatial hypertext is also a kind of visual language, a language that can evolve over time, which is also very interesting for me, and I think a very interesting approach. Yeah, so this was just something that came into my mind.
Completely agree. That's a very good point. Spatial hypertext has a long history of academic research, and we should definitely not ignore that. Right. Thank you, everybody. See some of you Fridays, Mondays, and also next month. And yeah, wonderful. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Bye-bye.